Alright, welcome to our video on stress. As soon as you're done watching this video, go ahead and take the, hopefully you've taken some good notes, take the Chapter 8 Quiz 4 that I'll post immediately after I post this. Alright, so stress, ain't nobody got time for that. So first let's define what stress is. Alright, it's a psychological state associated with some type of physiological and hormonal changes that are caused by conflict, trauma, or any other disruptive influences. And those things are called stressors. I'm going to get to that in a second. All right. Stress, even though it's a psychological state, it's actually happening in your brain. The physiological response that it could cause is a physical illness. So if you've ever felt so stressed, you feel sick. All right. Stress is any circumstances, either real or perceived. So sometimes it's like really happening. Other times it's you're thinking about it and you're overthinking and you're getting your mind all worked up. But if you feel that whether it's a real or perceived circumstance, if you feel that it threatens your well-being, then it's labeled as stress. And when the stress is severe, when it's felt as being severe, it actually impairs your ability to cope with that stress. All right, and we'll talk about how to cope and different types of stressors coming up. All right, I said I'd talk about stressors and what they are. Stressors are traumatic events outside the usual range of the human experience. They're uncontrollable events, unpredictable events, and events that challenge the limits of your capabilities and self-concepts. They could also be internal conflicts. So, to differentiate between stressor and stress, because they are two separate things. All right, a stressor is the stressful stimulus. It's a condition demanding adaptation. It's the thing. Okay, stressor is what is going to cause you stress. Stress is the physical and mental changes that occur in response to challenging and threatening situations. It's your reaction. So stress is your reaction to the stressor, the thing. All right, 4 components to stress response. 1 is cognitive appraisal. Anytime you think of something that's cognitive, it means you're thinking about it. So you're identifying the threat and determine how you're going to cope. So you're identifying what the stressor is. And this is different for everybody. The physiological response. How is your body reacting to the stress? 3, subjective feelings, your emotions. Right? How do you feel about it? Right, what emotions are going into you being stressed? Some of us get angry when we're stressed. Some of us get really depressed, things like that. And finally, your behavior, action taken because of your stress. So these 4 things together are components of how we respond to stress. All right. Stress is not merely a stimulus or response. Right? It's a process by which you appraise and cope with environmental threats and challenges. So for example, you have a stressful event, all right, a tough math test or a tough psych test coming up. All right. First you need to appraise the stress. You need to identify it. Are you seeing it as a threat or a challenge? All right, if you see the stressful event, the tough test, all right, as a threat, what's going to happen is you think, yikes, this is beyond me. You start to panic and freeze up. That's your response. All right, test anxiety right here. All right. However, if you perceive the test as a challenge rather than a threat, all right, you see it as a I've got this type thing, all right, then your response is going to be more focused. All right, so if you're a person that you don't test well or you get test anxiety, things like that, it's because you are appraising the test as a threat, and this is happening. It's normal. All right, start thinking of it in a more positive way. Think of it as a challenge. Challenges are good. All right. So when short-lived stress is taken as a challenge, stressors have a positive effect. However, if the stress is prolonged, it can actually be harmful. So if it's like a thing that's drawn out and it keeps going, it's harder to see it as a challenge because it seems never ending. All right, but a test, you know that like as soon as the class is over, it's done. All right, so try to, next time you have a test, whether it's in psych or another class, think positively about it going in. Take it as a challenge. Don't see it as a threat, and see if that helps you. All right, types of stressors. So types of things that stress us out. Such as catastrophic events, life-changing situations, chronic stressors, and daily hassles. I'm going to define what each of those are so you can tell the difference. All right, a catastrophic event is something that's sudden or unpredicted, potentially life-threatening experience or trauma. So for example, here I put basically natural disasters, things like that. They're like tornado, volcano, flood. It's sudden, it's unpredicted generally, and they're life-threatening. Right? This is a catastrophic event, a really huge stressor. Life changes can be a huge stress as well. So life circumstances that create demands for which you have to adjust to. Adjusting can be a stressor. All right. For example, marriage. We might think of like planning a wedding as it's a happy time, but it's also a very stressful time because a lot of changes are going to be made, right? Particularly if you're a woman or if you're doing the name change thing, like taking another last name, you got to go through all the paperwork to handle that. There's a lot of paperwork on that end as well. There's a financial aspect to it. Your life is going to change. Your living situation is probably going to change. All right. So I could tell you from personal experience when I was planning my wedding, I was happy as could be. I thought I had this. You know, I'm a planner. It's what I do. But I go to the doctor. Apparently, my blood pressure is through the roof. My body was not handling the life-changing stressor as well as I thought I was. Divorce can also be a life-changing stressor. Again, your life is changing. A new baby can be a life-changing stressor, as well as a new job. All right, all of these changes in your life, both good and bad, can be stressors. Chronic stress or chronic stressors are those that continue over a long period of time. So while we all may not be victims of crime, it's still something that it's there. So it's considered a chronic stress because it's around us. So it is in some cases in the back of our minds. So if you think of, if you live in like a really bad neighborhood, all right, particularly, that's where crime is going to be a chronic stress for you because you have to worry about it more. Right? You have to worry about walking down the street. You have to worry about, you know, getting mugged all the time and things like that. So depending on where you live, crime can be considered a chronic stressor because it's over a long period of time. Illness, right? A prolonged illness can be seen as a chronic stressor because it's there for a long period of time. Work, all right? If you have a really tough, demanding job like this guy does here, that is a chronic stressor because you're doing it for a while. It's your job. You're doing it for a long period of time. It's what you do. And then unemployment can also be a chronic stressor because it can be long term and it puts a huge financial burden on you. Then you have your daily hassles. These are irritations, pressures, annoyances that may not be significant on their own, but they do add up over time. So for example, traffic. All right. If you're sitting in traffic, sometimes you tend to feel stressed, like, oh my God, I have someplace to be. This is really stressful. But really, it's just an annoyance. Right? But it is still a different type of stress. Now, if you're in that traffic every day, all right, then it maybe starts to become another type of stress because it can add up. But just initially sitting in traffic one day on Mountain Road trying to get out of school, that's a daily hassle stress. Same with some maybe homework, all right? Sometimes like this video or something. It can be an irritation or an annoyance, but it's going to go away. All right. The stress response system. So when we talked about emotion, all right, the one theory was the Cannon-Bard theory. Same guy here. Cannon proposed that that the stress response is fast. It's your fight or flight response. It's marked by an outpour of epinephrine and norepinephrine from your inner adrenal glands. This increases your heart rate and respiration rate and mobilizes sugar and fat and dulls pain. All right, so when you're stressed, boom, that happens automatically. So this should sound familiar. Take us back to Unit 3. It's part of our autonomic nervous system, and specifically the sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system. So this is your fight or flight response. It gets your body prepared to deal with something. All right, so everything is like all amped up. The hypothalamus and pituitary gland also respond to stress, but slower. They do this by triggering your outer adrenal glands to secrete cortisol. This is just the beginning if the stress is longer lasting. Because if the stress is long lasting, your body, like your parasympathetic nervous system, never kicks in, that part that calms you down after your fight or flight response. If you are chronically stressed, your parasympathetic nervous system just doesn't kick in. Your body keeps doing this, and it can't calm itself back down, and that could, again, make you physically ill. Right, there's something called the general adaptation syndrome. You are definitely going to need to know this, as well as its abbreviation, GAS. It's the concept that your body's adaptive response to stress happens in 3 stages. All right, so first is your alarm reaction phase, which is basically where you're mobilizing your resources. You are now prepared to deal with stress. It's occurred and you're ready to deal with it. All right, the phase 2 is the resistance stage, which is where you're now coping with that stress. Right, you're dealing it, you're handling it. If the resistance phase goes on too long, eventually you get worn out. All right, stressors wear us down. All right, and then you head into phase 3, which is exhaustion. All right, if you deal with the stress for way too long, you start to feel exhausted. All right, and that basically means you're in phase 3 of the general adaptation syndrome. All right. All right. Early warning signs of exhaustion stage: headaches, gastrointestinal disturbances. You can get skin rashes or hives, feel dizzy, fatigue, hypertension, so high blood pressure, aggravation or arthritis, colitis, asthma, ulcers, diabetes. All of these are signs that you've reached that exhaustion stage, and your body is really struggling now to cope with whatever that stress is. All right, so that's signs that you're in the exhaustion stage. All right, you may need to take a step back from whatever it is that you're doing that's causing you that stress because your body's not handling it well. All right, for example, when I was planning my wedding, hypertension was starting to happen. Okay, so that was a sign that maybe I need to back off the planning a little bit. All right, so stage 1, we're going more in depth with this, the alarm reaction. Hypothalamus, just to make sure you get it, is fight or flight response in the alarm stage. Response it's your response going into action. You're releasing neurotransmitters and hormones to deal with a stressful situation. If the stressors persist over long periods of time, this initially adaptive reaction can become distress. Right now your body's in distress as it depletes the body's energy and defense resources. This can cause high blood pressure, basically debilitation of your immune system, so your immune system starts to go down. This is why you get easily sick when you're stressed. Fat deposits in blood vessels will decrease. You get ulcers, like I said earlier. Stage 2, resistance. If a stressor persists, but not so strong that it overwhelms you during stage 1, you'll begin to rebound during stage 2. So outwardly, the body appears to be gaining an advantage while resisting the stressor. Inwardly, though, so again, you may appear that you're handling it well, but inwardly, you're trying to restore homeostasis, yet your body is still working to cope with the stress. Back to my planning the wedding example. Outwardly, I appeared fine. Inwardly, apparently not so much. All right, resistance only applies to the original stressor, so the original thing that's making you stressed out. If another stressor is then introduced, your defenses could be depleted even more, making you unable to respond to the second stressor, right? Because it's so occupied with the first thing. All right, so if you're stressed out about one thing and then another thing comes up, oh my Lord, just like you go crazy, all right? Because you can't deal with that second one because you're dealing with one thing right now. Stage 3, exhaustion. If resistance fails to relieve the stress, so if your stress isn't relieved in stage 2, the symptoms of alarm, so phase 1, will reappear. This time accompanied by even more powerful responses, so autonomic nervous system responses. And this overcompensates, and the body has already used up so much of its energy dealing with the first stressor, and it's not been removed, so you're just exhausted. And this can actually cause eventual death if it goes on for too long and is way too much. Usually there are warning signs of exhaustion that we mentioned earlier. It could be heart attack. You can have a heart attack. Clogged arteries, excessive colds or flu, frequent headaches, things like that. All right. And then I found this quote slide I really like. If you don't want to be ill, find solutions. Negative people do not find solutions. They enlarge problems. They prefer gossip and pessimism. A bee is small but produces one of the sweetest things that exists. We are what we think. The negative thought generates negative energy and is transformed into illness. All right, so stress and illness. Any stressor, including mental processes like worry, can affect one's health and resources like your immune system. All right, the human immune response, which evolved to deal with short-term stressors, may react to chronic stressors by breaking down and turning on itself. How? Well, there's no physical enemy to battle, so the body's response becomes maladaptive, and the body can become more vulnerable to infection and injury. So your body's using up all of its resources to deal with the stressor that it's not working on your immune system, and then you get sick, so you get a cold because it's going around, something that your body would usually fend off, but it can't because it's used up all of its resources dealing with the stress. All right, stress and disease. Negative emotions and health-related consequences. Mind and body interact with each other. All right, everything psychological is simultaneously physiological. All right, so you have persistent stressors and negative emotions can lead to not only unhealthy behaviors such as smoking, drinking, poor nutrition, and sleep to try and it's a way of coping. So unhealthy behaviors, but it can also lead to release of so much stress hormone. Again, if there's so much of that in your system, it could cause heart disease, it suppresses your immune system, and your autonomic nervous system is basically really hyper, really amped up, and you just are drained of all your resources. So, for example, stress in the heart, percent of developing coronary heart disease. So pessimists, people who tend to think very negatively, are at a higher risk than people who are kind of in the middle and optimists, people who think positively at heart disease. Which brings us to two different personality types. You've probably heard of this in a health class. Type A and Type B. Type A people are competitive. They're achievement-oriented, sense of time urgency, difficulty relaxing, impatient, angry, can be hostile, outwardly confident, but full of self-doubt. Right? That's your Type A personality. Type B personality, you're relaxed, easygoing, unpressured. So which one are you? We'll look at this in class. All right, promoting health, modifying type A lifestyle can reduce reoccurrence of heart attacks. So if you go back to looking at the difference between type A and type A seems like they hold probably a lot more stress. Like a lot more things probably bother type A than type B, because type B, a lot of stuff comes up and they're like, oh, whatever. All right, they're the more easygoing kind. So type A's, I would think, would be our golds. All right. So you look at the rate of what goes on. So type A's tend to possibly have more health risks if they hold on to too much stress. So they have to modify how they handle certain things. Post-traumatic stress disorder. This is we tend to think of this with our soldiers returning from war, but it could happen not just from that, but there's something traumatic that has happened to you and your body, you're not coping with it well. And what can happen is you become numb to the world, and estranged from others, a lack of interest in activity, to relieve trauma repeatedly in memories and dreams, so you relive it. It's flashbacks. You have sleep disturbances, decreased concentration, you're overly alert, you're always like on edge. It can last for years, and it correlates to substance abuse, violence, and interpersonal problems that it may cause. Again, your body is failing to cope with the stress. Right? In the past year alone, the number of diagnosed cases in the military jumped 50%, and that's just the diagnosed cases that we know about. Studies estimate that 1 in every 5 military personnel returning from Iraq and Afghanistan has PTSD in some way. 20% of these soldiers have been deployed in the past 6 years, have PTSD. So that's over 300,000 of our soldiers have PTSD. 17% of combat troops are women. 71 percent of female military personnel out of that 17 develop PTSD, actually not necessarily due to what they're seeing and happening overseas, but sexual assault within the ranks. PTSD is classified as a DSM-4, which we're going to learn about DSM-4. Well, we're going to learn about DSM-5, the updated version, after the Vietnam War. That will come in abnormal psychology. So we'll talk more about post-traumatic stress there. So finally, strategies for alleviating stress. To reduce stress by changing events that cause stress or by changing how you react to it. This is called problem-focused coping. For example, your car keeps breaking down, causing you stress. So you address the problem by buying a new car. When we cannot change a stressful situation and respond by attending to our own emotional needs, this is called emotion-focused coping. So that is, for example, when you break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, which causes you stress, it's a stressful time, you seek support from your family and friends because you need the emotional stability. So problem focused, all right, so you want to fix the problem. So for your car, it keeps breaking down. So just get a new one and you fix the problem. Right? You don't have the same stressor anymore. And the emotional one, you need to seek emotional support from family and friends after a breakup. All right, how to cope with it? Cognitive. 1, change the thought patterns that you have, like thinking of stress as a challenge rather than a threat, like we talked about earlier. Emotional. Knowing that you have a support system in place, or getting advice from them. Behavioral. Change your behavior to minimize the impact of stress. So this could come down to time management. Try to manage your time better, or get rid of some activities. Learn to say no. All right. Physical. Change your physical responses. This could include medication. It could also include doing some relaxation, or like activities like the breathing we did that one day, the kind of yoga-esque day that we had. So try some of those things, as well as exercise. All right, we'll look at how exercise actually helps us to cope with stress in class. All right, and these are some links that we're going to look at in class. So you are all done. All right, wasn't quite as short as the other one, but hopefully you got some good information out of it. So go ahead and take the quiz 4. It's the last one for this unit. All right, bye-bye. Bye.